Hello, everyone. Nick Nye again, but I'd like Jonathan and Kate to have an opportunity to introduce themselves.
Hi, Jonathan Clarkson. I'm Vice President and Head of Marketing for Southwest Airlines.
And Kate Rush-Sheehy, SVP of Strategy and Insights at GSD&M, agency just down the street.
Awesome. So, Jonathan, Kate, thank you very much. So, really looking at Southwest as a building brand with new generations, right? We look at the evolution of the freedom to fly. So, Southwest has really had an emphasis on freedom as a core value. How has that concept evolved over the years to resonate with new generations of travelers? And how do you plan to continue to evolve in the future? Really, kind of based on the current marketing strategy.
Yeah, it's an interesting. It's been an interesting flight, no pun intended, with freedom over the years. If you think about the initial Southwest as the purveyor of freedom, we gave people the freedom to fly. When we started back in the early 70s, only about 10% of Americans had ever been in an airplane, on a commercial aircraft before. And with low prices and accessible airports, we sort of changed that dynamic. I think what's different in the way we think about freedom today, back then we were sort of the providers of the freedom. What we find is that, especially when it comes to a marketing message, consumers want to be empowered with the freedom. And when we say, so it's less about us giving that to you, it's more about you having it and having the agency around freedom. I think you'll notice that sort of subtle but important tonal change in how we talk to the emerging customer. It may be a little bit different than how we did back in the day.
And I would build on that. As we've done some research, and you think about how Southwest liberated markets, if you will, right? Actually helping the prices to come down, the Southwest effect to be a thing. So consumers who've been with us for years really understand what it means to have freedom with Southwest, but younger consumers who've had Southwest their whole adult life aren't as aware. So as we saw in research, for them, freedom is about how they can have it, and then also that freedom is free with Southwest. There's not going to be a bunch of add-ons that are going to cost you. So how do we frame it in ways that'll be attractive to them versus a kind of larger concept overall?
Yeah, and you talk about framing to different generations, right? And Southwest being a 52-year-old brand, how are you continuing to evolve how you're framing that brand to different generations and different demographics?
Yeah. Well, it's been a fascinating and a very fun evolution. I think one of the things that we have in our favor is that what we consider our points of difference, some of the things that Kate just referenced, where we don't nickel and dime our customers, and we sort of we steer you toward the path of simplicity when it comes to the booking process and things like that. Like, that's compelling whether you're Gen Z or a baby boomer. But what's different is how we talk about it, the tonality that we use with the creative, and then of course the channels. Where a message may resonate very strongly on traditional broadcast or streaming television, we might have a different execution on TikTok or Snapchat, as an example.
And if I could brag on your team for a minute, I think the fact that there just aren't silos at Southwest, so when a message works really well in social, the team lets us know, and we can translate that to what it looks like for an overarching campaign or something really great in email, we pull into social, right? You start to understand across channels what's working for different audiences, whether it's someone who is our core loyal flyer with Southwest or someone who's just starting to meet the brand. So I love that, how the learnings get translated across every team to make a really powerful message, regardless of channel.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Kate, just kind of looking at different campaigns. Do you want to talk a little bit about campaign from a creative aspect in the past? What's upcoming? Really, what is resonating well with your consumers?
So, if anybody watched the Oscars last night, you might have seen one of our "Wanna Get Away" spots that ran. Really lovely, contextually relevant one. It was a spoof of an actor who can't get his lines right. Want to get away? Now you can, right? With great deals that will allow you to to see whoever you'd like. And what's great about Want to Get Away, it's one of our most distinctive campaigns, super memorable. The internet loves to have fun with it when there is an embarrassing moment and kind of play with it. That's how you know you're really part of the zeitgeist and you've made it. And while we have more cinematic approach to what you see in TV or premium video, we also do really great ones with UGC and social. So really thinking about how a message that works so hard for us can be more relevant by channel.
Coincidentally, one of the things we just did last week, I'll say over the 52 years at Southwest, we're probably a little bit more data-driven than we were, say, in 1971. So that's usually a good thing, but we did testing recently, and we tested finished versions of both the Want to Get Away ad that Kate referenced, and then another one we have in market right now called Worst Bar Ever. And both of them just blew the doors off of the norms for the ad research firm who tests 30-second ads all the time, regardless of brand or industry. Both executions are really strong in terms of likability, and then the humor really comes through. And that's what we find as consumers, regardless of whether it's UGC or just your traditional 30-second spot, people embrace humor and it helps with brand memorability. So we'll continue to stick with that because it's working really well.
Yeah.
And how do you take those the emotional KPIs and actually turn them back into measurable, tangible business results?
Yeah, that's a great question because there are so many examples of ads, for example, that have resonated emotionally, but then you find out that the VP of marketing got fired 3 months later because they didn't hit their sales goals. So we certainly keep an eye on that. Probably our most important metric at Southwest is shops. So the number of people that come to our channels, whether it's through the app or through the full site or mobile web, and actually shop for a flight. And in order to count as a shop, you have to put what we call an O&D or a city in both your origination and your destination field, hit search, and then actually start looking at prices. And then a percentage of those people actually buy. We call that a conversion rate. But we are tasked with driving X number of shops every day, every week, every month in order to get to in order to fill the funnel, fill the very top of the funnel with people who are interested, qualified leads, and then we get them to book as much as we can. But that's probably the most important metric for us.
And from a creative optimization standpoint, it's important to us that we're getting butts in seats and people on planes every single day. We really think about how brand lift studies alongside all of our advertising that is running online to understand how is it driving some of those emotional measures, and then how are those specific pieces of creative also driving tangible outcomes today. And you never want either side of that equation to be out of whack. Ideally, it's doing both in lockstep, and when it's not, we figure out what isn't working, what message might be more resonant right now, and really keep that on a pretty close rotation.
Awesome. Yeah, and you talked a bit about your app and mobile web and whatnot. So can we talk a little more about the mobile strategy and growth? So really increasing importance there, right? How has Southwest leveraged mobile technology to enhance the customer experience and ultimately drive those top-line business growth?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we have an increasing. We've been mobile-centric for the last few years, but that's what's different now is I think we're genuinely mobile first. Like when we think about how we're going to make changes that are going to benefit our customers, we do so with the app in mind because that's becoming increasingly the lion's share of visits for sure, and then even more and more the number of shops are actually coming through the app to a much greater degree than we would have thought maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Mary Margaret, I'm sure you'd agree. So we're seeing a lot of that, and what that means is that your innovation process, whether it's with technology and user experience, has to be mobile-led, and we've evolved quite a bit in that space, I think, over the last few years. It's a distinct area of focus for us.
I love the Southwest app, not just because I work on Southwest, but there was a flight I had booked for a trip just a couple weeks ago, and last minute I ended up not being able to go. It was 2 clicks. I opened the app, clicked on my reservation, canceled, got the credit back immediately because if you paid for it, you should keep that money. And it's incredible how much easier it is than any other airline. Like the feeling of engaging with the Southwest app feels like flying on Southwest, which is fun. You have a great experience, and I love that you guys have thought about a mobile strategy that just embodies what the brand is about too.
I'm glad to hear you say that. One of the things that we really focus on is having a frictionless experience when you book, and that is a differentiator for us, is that it's just easier from beginning to end. And the more things that you put in the booking path, and they could be efforts to drive revenue or even clarify things for customers, but sometimes those can actually lower your conversion rate. The most subtle changes that we make, particularly when we're adding a step in the process, can have remarkable, oftentimes negative consequences in terms of the number of people that actually go from shopping all the way to booking. So that's something we keep in mind, but it is a balance because you also want to ensure that any notifications that customers need to be aware of are in there. If there are opportunities to sell an early bird or upgraded boarding, you want to represent those because they generate revenue. So it's more than anything, it's a balance.
Yeah, and you talk about a frictionless user experience, and really, how that resonates to actually being on the plane, right? So how important is that frictionless experience and the kind of the no hidden, features? How important is that to you as the branding and the content side?
It makes our job easy, right? When the product is already exceptional, consumers really love it, and we have the brand tracker to back it up. Consumers love Southwest. It means you can have a lot more fun with the advertising, really make sure every message from the brand feels fun, is a breath of fresh air. Like it makes the advertising job fun. Like the whole team that works on the Southwest business at GSD&M has a great time because you're never kind of wringing your hands, well, there's this skeleton in the closet and that doesn't quite work how it should, and what if this happens? It's like, yeah, the product's great, people love it, let's go have some fun and make the brand memorable and get those butts in seats.
Awesome. So, talking about having fun and looking at the company, right? Yep. Jonathan, you've been there for 17 years. Can you talk to us, a bit about the culture, what's kept you there, what you look for, within your teams?
Yeah. So I think you hit on it, Nick. The culture is probably the most critical element to that. Colleen Barrett, who is our president starting in 2001 and now president emeritus, really felt as though by putting the employee first, that would be a good idea because then employees would like the job that they're coming to every day and they would be more likely to cascade that on to a customer. And it was a very simple idea, but we refer to it as a golden rule. But I think that has endured. I think that the fact that the employee is such a great emphasis at Southwest is a big deal. There's also, I think, an unwavering willingness to be customer-centric. And I think that is unusual in the airline industry in particular. So it's always been nice for me. I worked at Southwest for a long time, but I worked at several other places prior to that. And we get the benefit of working with a lot of partners in the current space, and I don't see anybody with that same focus on customer centricity. And it makes you realize that you're fortunate to have that at the company you work for.
Yeah, and you see that really get passed through from employees to customers, right? Awesome. And then really looking into some digital trends in the marketing strategy. So how is Southwest adapting its marketing strategy to leverage the digital trends, right? Again, with mobile, that's a big growth segment. How are you ultimately adapting your marketing strategy? More and more, like a lot of people in the audience, I'm sure, leaning towards social. I think we'd be doing that anyway, even if we weren't making a more distinct effort to build the growth target that we have. But I think the fact that we're doing that has just accelerated our work there. Like I used TikTok as an example earlier. We were doing a little bit of organic in TikTok. We weren't doing any paid or anything like that last year, and then we did some testing, and the impressions that generated, the level of engagement, even relative to other
social channels is just off the charts. So now that's become sort of a leading tactic for us.
And that becomes fun from a creative and messaging standpoint as you think about testing and learning into new channels, different ad formats, what is the right message. And I love that the team, in partnership with the media team over at Southwest, really does think about what is the right creative before we go brief, before we go into production, where is it going to live so we can capture things on set that are perfect for every channel and every kind of placement versus retrofitting so you've got something that feels a little matching luggage but isn't as impactful as it could be.
And kind of back to the culture aspects, really from your side too, being the creative agency, how has working with Southwest ultimately, had an impact on your culture and your teams?
Oh, wow. I mean, Southwest has been a partner for over 43 years. Our founders were deeply connected to the founders of Southwest, and I don't think it's a stretch to say, like, it's very much kind of twin souls. Like, there's so much that we have learned from the Southwest team over the years, things like the golden rule. It's why folks at GSD&M, our average tenure is over 9 years, which is unusual in the creative agency space, but it's the best people. Like, some of my teams here in the crowd, I can't imagine not working with them. And when people come with open hands, like the Southwest team does, when they brief us, when they have feedback for us, when they need to push us, it very much is how we operate as well. So it's amazing to learn from great clients and bring some of that culture back home to our office as well.
Yeah, I think we've been really fortunate to not just establish but maintain the relationship that we've had with GSD&M over all those years. It's just like any relationship. It requires work, right? Like, the people have to understand each other, and we make great strides together. But I've been at other places where, at the end of the day, the agency just has to get you as a brand, and they have to understand what you want to do for your customers. And that doesn't always happen. I mean, again, there are plenty of stories about people that have, like, very highly regarded agencies that have come on and worked for brands and not stuck around very long just because they didn't get the client. I feel fortunate that we have the relationship with our agency that we do, because they really understand not just us, our culture, but also what we want to ultimately impart to our customers.
Yeah, and again, culturally, being there for 17 years, what's kept you there?
Well, nobody's offered me another job. No, I think the culture has a lot to do with it. We work with remarkable people. We've got I think, we won't get into numbers, but I have been positively blown away by how little attrition we have over the last few years, particularly when you look at marketing departments and how they tend to have a little bit of churn. So that tells me that, especially in a thriving job market, that people actually are here because they want to be here, and I think that comes through. So when you're able to work with people who enjoy what they're doing and are inspired by the work every day, the years just fly by. It's hard to believe it's been 17 years because it doesn't feel like anywhere near that long.
Well, especially through the pandemic, right? Working in travel in 2020 was hard and stressful. You didn't know what was going to come next, and to see everyone stick it out because of their passion for the brand is a real testament to the culture.
Yeah, that's a great point. I do think a little bit of wanting to work in this industry, you have to be somewhat of a dopamine junkie. Yeah. And I've heard this at a conference one time. The airline industry is the only one that endures a once-a-decade crisis every year. So there's always stuff going on that you have to deal with, like you don't have a choice not to. So I think that probably plays into it as well.
Yeah, and you talked about the pandemic, and that's detrimental to the industry in the vertical, right? What does and travel's bounced back, if that's safe to say. What does the next 3 years for Southwest for travel look like to you guys?
When we've done the recent research and gearing up for our next campaign, the majority of growth in travel, specifically in air travel, will come from Gen Z. And that is we've been very intentioned in thinking about how insights for people who may not be as familiar with Southwest, therefore can't love us because they don't know us well enough, is super important. So how are we really thinking about not just resting on our laurels and the things that have worked really well for us to date, but also what this new audience needs, how they're prioritizing mental health and wellness. What does that look like in terms of their travel behaviors? How do we have great campaigns that don't just talk about Southwest at a large level, but are really showing them occasions and moments where Southwest is the perfect airline to get them to where they're going, whether that is a wedding, it's revenge travel, and everything in between. So I think that is going to be a really core focus for us moving forward, knowing where that growth is going to come from.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. I think the reference Kate made to resting on your laurels, that's a reference to a quote from our founder, Herb Kelleher, who used to say, when you rest on laurels, the only thing that happens is you end up getting a thorn in your butt. So we'll continue to move, continue to evolve. I'm really excited about the space that we're playing in now with our growth target and trying to develop the next generation of core loyal flyers that have the same affinity for the brand that folks do today. And then I think the other thing that we're starting to see more of, if you think about, just think about any plane you've been on, there's a certain percentage of people that are traveling for leisure and some that are traveling for business. And pre-pandemic, that mix was a lot more balanced than it is today. So commercial flying has become a very leisure-focused activity. I do think we'll start to see more business travel come back. Maybe not some of the types of trips that we used to take, like day trips and overnights. Like you see a smaller percentage of those, but the emergence of leisure travel and people blending trips with for business and leisure purposes is, I think, will ultimately make up for that. And it'll be fun to watch those trends and to respond to those as a marketer.
One of my favorite Herb Kelleher quotes is, someone asked a reporter, what's your strategy? He said, oh, I have a strategy. It's called doing things. And so just as we look at trends, whether it's a new demographic, it's the types of trips that people take, I think what we're excited about is to keep trying things, testing, learning, optimizing overall, because there's so many occasions and so many people who could choose Southwest. We want to make sure that they do.
Yeah, and so you talk about sort of the mix of travel, business versus leisure travel, and then specifically talked on Gen Z. How are you reaching Gen Z? How are you changing your messaging, et cetera?
So for a campaign that we're working on right now, we had a whole thread that is really focused on younger consumers and the kind of trips they're taking. So like set jetting is now a thing, right? Where there's a show that they watch or a movie and they want to go and vacation in the place where that movie was filmed. They want to stay in that hotel. They want to check that out. It's like, great. How does that become part of our messaging? No, it's not the trip most people are taking, but it's aspirational and it's fun and it shows that we're part of culture. We understand what kind of things are going on in the world. So it'll be more things along those lines while still sticking true to our core. Like that's not an alienating message for someone who doesn't want to choose that kind of vacation. Mm-hmm. So just really thinking about kind of both sides of our audience and how we have messages and kind of moments that will matter to them.
It would not be a panel if I didn't bring up AI though, right? Yes. Yeah. So how is Southwest and from the creative side or the marketing side, how are you leveraging AI today?
Yeah, well, as a couple different ways. So as a company, we're looking at AI as a way on the operational side, as a way to, again, we talked about removing friction on the customer side. There's also friction that comes in on the operational side. So we're looking at a couple different Gen AI techniques there to help reduce some of that and just simplify that process. On the customer-facing side, there's been some fascinating emerging technology already. I think that ultimately a Gen AI tool that lives on your app or your site or wherever that can help people with travel planning based on using ChatGPT or whatever to just help them sort of, I mean, we fly to over 118 cities, so it's hard to know exactly what you want to do when you look. So the ability for Gen AI to be able to condense some of that based on a few things that you like and help you with your decision process is not just a really cool idea. I think it's just eventually everybody's going to have to do that. And you're starting to see some of the OTAs like Expedia is starting to experiment with that a little bit. So I'm excited to see where we go with that.
And that's actually the exact process that we're using on the agency side as well. Like when you get a brief, there are 187 ways you could take it. So part of what we've been using things like ChatGPT to do is to get what are the most obvious things off the table, like where every airline might have a message that's in that vein, and figure out what we could push beyond. Like if that is the table stakes and the thing that anyone could Google or find themselves, great. Now we know what the bar is. Let's beat it. Let's find things that are more interesting. Let's really push into dimensions that might have been lower on the list of most popular things or ways to think about a certain topic. And then we're also using it as we start to get into a piece of creative around occasions. What are the top ways that Gen Z is traveling right now? Oh, great. Like once again, you're shortcutting some of those things that might have formerly taken a long time, and then using our syndicated research through trusted partners to validate it and make sure that it really is true.
Awesome, and I know that we have a few minutes left, and the team has mentioned, your team is in the audience, so we'd love to hear from
a friendly crowd.
I would love to hear from both of you. So, as you're building out teams, what characteristics are you looking for, in your employees?
So one of the best pieces of advice I've ever received as it relates to work in particular is there are two types of people, simplifiers and complicators. And you always want to be a simplifier, and you always want to surround yourself with people who appreciate simplification. And so I think that's probably one of the sort of the red thread that runs through everybody that I work closely with, and not just at Southwest, but also on the partner side, agency side, is that we look for ways to make things easier as opposed to trying to make them harder.
We take our core values really seriously at GSD&M. They're etched into the rotunda floor, and the two things that every GSD&Mer embodies, for sure, is curiosity and restlessness, right? The notion that you'll keep asking questions and wondering what if and why, and then restlessness, like we never just rest on the last win. As soon as we've launched a great campaign together, we're thinking about, all right, how do we push the envelope? What could we learn from what we just did? When are we going to get our first readout? What are we going to do next? So those two things, I think, make for a great creative environment and also make for great work over time.
Awesome. And before opening up for questions, I do have a question myself. So when you go to Google Flights, why isn't Southwest there?
Well, in a manner of speaking, we are. It's just that our logo is grayed out and we don't show you the price. We say, click here. Yeah. So we're basically telling you, we fly that route, but if you want to learn more about it, you have to go to the website. And that's really born out of our longstanding distribution strategy, which is if you want to buy, it's only at Southwest, or it used to be at southwest.com, only at Southwest. I think when we get questions like that, the answer is often never say never. Mm-hmm. I think what we'll do, with the exception of bags, I don't think we'll ever see us charge for bags, but if there are things that we aren't doing today that you see other people doing, it's not necessarily that we've made some philosophical decision to never do that. We just want the customer desire, the customer need for that to guide us there. And I would put Google Flights and OTAs in that bucket. Yeah.
And you get to own the UX, right? When you get them directly to your site, you own that frictionless experience again.
That's right.
Awesome. Any questions from the audience?
Yeah. Hello, my name is Max, local marketing platform from Republic. So I was just curious, you mentioned that most of the flights now are leisure flights, and of course most of them are booked online. But are still some of the flights booked offline in those travel agencies? So how big is that part?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. A large and increasing percentage of the business flights are actually booked through GDS or through a third party that focuses on business travel, and they have corporate travel managers that will drive their passengers, the passengers who are working for that company, through that booking tool.
Okay, so for you it would make sense to bring more foot traffic to those guys so they actually sell more of your flights, right?
Yeah, that's the tension. So yes, there is more volume to be had as a result of that, but when somebody else is selling your flight, they're typically charging you to do it. So there's pressure on the operating margin that you just have to balance. Does the amount of additional volume that we're going to get for something like that make up for the lower margin that we would receive? Because at the end of the day, like a lot of industries, the airlines have never been a high margin industry.
I flew Southwest here. Great flight. Thank you.
Perfect. Glad to hear you say that.
Yeah, you spoke, and I have a funny story for you. I'll tell you after. You spoke earlier about from the top of the funnel to the low funnel, from the shops to the conversions and the branding at the top. And Kate, how does not only the execution and strategy change for the different parts of the funnel, but how does the measurement change?
Yeah, at the top of the funnel, we're really focused on the brand. Are we memorable? Are the right attributes, like being seen as simple to use, easy, attractive for someone like me? Are those measures in place? As we start to get into specific channels that are driving action, really making sure we're driving consideration. Like, first consideration is the place that we always want to be, knowing the way people choose flights, travel in general, can be kind of functional at first. It's price and selection. So making sure we're sitting in that and they understand that you're going to get freedom with us. The freedom is free. You're not going to get nickel and dime. The value is there, and it's a great experience overall. And then as we get further down the funnel, it's where we partner really closely with Jonathan's team to make sure we understand those very specific sales drivers that are in place and how that is correlating to what media is in market.
Thank you guys so much. Please
Thank
give
you.
them a round
Thank
of
you.
applause.
Thank you.